Hello ladies and gentlemen, Willie here. Today I wanted to talk world buffs. Love them or hate them, they have become a real staple of Classic, and despite how unnecessary they are in order to clear the content, for many they have become mandatory. Even back during vanilla, they only really started to be used frequently around the time of pre-nerf Cthulhu progression. In fact, devs back then only intended them to be used as a fun little bonus from completing an epic quest. Perhaps your guild would drop an Oni buff before heading out if you had the luxury, but it was much rarer for certain, and it was only in Nax Ramus when Blizzard designed the content with buffs and consumes in mind, and we know how many people got to see that content back then, that being next to none. So I was more than a little bit surprised when I read this. This server will conduct a technical test in Stormwind City and Orgrimmar. Players can automatically get Rallying Cry of the Dragon Slayer every hour. Automatic world buff drops. Wow. There's one slight drawback. For, well, I'd imagine almost everybody watching this is only for Chinese realms, and the Blizzard we have running EU and NA do not run WoW in China. It's an entirely separate deal over there. Remember back in Phase 2 when China got the WoW token and all the drama around that? By the way, just in the off chance any person here does main in China or knows somebody who does, how does the auction house look for you and just prices of things in general? I'd be really interested to see what effect the tokens had after so much time. Anyways, back on track. Oni buff auto-dropping every hour. It's an interesting idea, but I'm not really sure what the goal of it is. I know from hearing about it enough that many players are tiring picking up the same buffs again and again. Oni and ZG require hand-ins too, unlike DMT or the Songflower, and with Phase 6 coming, is the hand-in content going to be slowing down at all? I feel like I see a near endless stream of Oni and ZG pugs going on, not to mention the less frequent Blackwing lair runs being done as well, and the barrier to entry for this content isn't all that bad either. I feel a server would have to be truly dead to have either of these buffs not dropping at least a couple times a day. I mean, Warchief's Blessing drops from a one-time quest, usually from somebody leveling, and that still goes out multiple times per day. It's a bit more effort to do it. I remember getting whispers during leveling my Shaman in UBRS asking if I was on the quest still, or you can even sell the quest hand-in too. As for Onyxia though, it's just one buff, there are still so many others. And honestly, Oni is by far the easiest buff to get. You're in your capital city, you can safely not be PvP tagged, it can't be dispelled, it lasts 2 hours, but they do say it's a technical test though. Maybe if feedback is good and it works fine, this will be extended to other areas. Maybe Spirit of Zandalar will be dropped every hour on Isle and Booty Bay next perhaps. I imagine a lot of people reading into this may be saying, why are you doing this to yourself if you don't like world buffs and you find them super annoying? You don't need to get them to clear the content. Well, it's just one of those typical MMORPG things where you want to get the most out of your character. You could make the same argument for consumables, and farming all that gold for them is just a waste of time, but at the end of the day, it's really this simple, at least for me. Why have Shadow Bolt do small number when it can do big number? Classes are just more fun with world buffs, or at least I think they are. But it's so close to Phase 6 now, might as well at least see Classic through with world buffs at least one time around, right? Who knows, there might be a second time or a third. Fresh, I'd say, is pretty likely one day in the future, and with it could be a new round of changes. Many fan servers have treated world buffs differently, such as disabling them when inside a raid simply because, well, you've seen what kind of activity it encourages, raid logging. Also, if you're actually trying to tune up the raids and make them more difficult, having world buffs in the mix makes it kind of impossible because you must assume players are using them. If you don't, the content's too easy. If you do, you have to account for at least a portion of the raid showing up fully buffed and doing certain expected amounts of damage, or your raid just turns into impossible DPS checks, where PvP server antics could actually stop progression inside of raids. Imagine if this was a thing in Classic. No thank you. Auto drops though out of the solutions, quote unquote. I wouldn't really have thought of this. It's an answer to it, but I don't think it's the best one. What else is there then? Well, first of all, they may expand the automatic buff drops on the hour every hour. ZG buff being dropped on Isle and Booty Bay. Maybe Diamond tribute buffs handed out by a friendly neighborhood ogre outside Diamond North. Songflowers not having cooldowns anymore. On top of that, do you make world buffs undispellable, or just do that baseline perhaps? This would stop a lot of the annoyances around them that people often engage in, as our good friend here would love to tell you about. Do you add an NPC inside of raids who just gives you every world buff once per week, and you lose them if you zone out of the raid, or perhaps you can keep them and have 2 hours of insane leveling or PvP each week? That actually sounds kind of fun, not gonna lie. As in like the NPCs who are there on the PTR, it sounds a bit not very classic-like. I guess you could just call them Herald of Stormwind or Orgrimmar and have them give you a pep talk about how you need as much power as you can to take on the fierce enemies of the raid or something like that. I don't know, it's just an idea. Or the exact opposite. All world buffs are auto-removed upon zoning into a raid. This one has certainly been a popular talking point. I think the real strength of this though is to enable tuning of the content to make it more difficult across all raids though. For me, the answer is whatever requires players not to raid log unless they choose to. There's nothing wrong with raid logging, but if you want to buff, your choice is gone. That sucks. So that leaves us with one of the last two options. So all world buffs then, or no world buffs? The all buffs for one raid per week means you get to keep high performance and try for a fast clear at least once per week, but takes away from having other old raids being as hard or tuned up due to the enormous discrepancy that having world buffs gives power-wise. Having no buffs at all makes it a constant, even playing field, and I think this would be the best option if the content were harder baseline. Also, you do have to consider, warriors out there, do you really want to lose about half of your rage generation or however much extra world buffs give you? Do mages want a much lower chance to keep that ignite ticking? Do paladins want to care about their mana bar at all? Just something to think about. Or do world buffs just create a toxic raid atmosphere? One mistake can cost the raid collectively dozens of hours of preparation time. Do you find your raiders don't care about performance or trying at all if world buffs are lost on a run? Would they try in the first place, or perhaps even be less motivated to raid anymore since their ability to optimize their character would be gone? And I know people will say it creates open world activity and gets people out and about there, out of their capital cities. Sure it does, but they get to their destination and guess what they do? They log out or sit there waiting on an alt for whatever buff or thing they need to pick up. It's not exactly creating a hive of activity, or you know, people just get summoned all over the world in very difficult to access places. That's pretty common as well. Even without world buffs, and I've done all the content with and without, it's still not exactly the most challenging stuff out there really. Personally, I'd prefer them to exist considering everything with the current tuning levels of the content. It's just the gameplay that results from world buffs, raid logging, which I think is the biggest issue for me. Either way, I hope they change in some way if and when Fresh Classic is a thing. I think there is really room for improvement here on the player experience. So what are your views on what the Chinese realms are testing, and how would you like your world buffs to be done in the future if you had a say? As always, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one very soon. If you like what you see, do give the video a like and subscribe, as there will be plenty more to come. Thank you guys all so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.